My daughter-in-law smiled at my table, tasted the food I had prepared, and then told me that everything I cherished needed to change. First, it was my dining room, then my boundaries, then my son. But Penelope forgot one thing: I had spent a lifetime building this family, and I wasn't about to let her walk in and erase it all with a smile. I've always prided myself on being a modern woman. At 68, living in the postcard-perfect historic district of Savannah, Georgia. I have the quintessential Southern setup, a crisp, white house with a wraparound porch and ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss. When my son Harrison announced he was marrying Penelope, a graphic designer from Brooklyn, I made a solemn vow to myself. I was not going to be that overbearing old-school mother-in-law, but life has a funny way of testing your vows. The first time they came down to visit after the wedding, I went all out. I spent the entire day cooking a massive traditional Southern dinner: scratch-made cornbread, slow-simmered collard greens, and sweet tea. I spent hours polishing the round oak dining table, a 3-generation family heirloom. I wanted Penelope to feel wrapped in our warmth. I wanted her to see that this table was a symbol of connection. No heads of the table, everyone equal. Then Penelope walked in, wearing distressed jeans and a massive battered backpack. She greeted me with a quick, breezy hug and immediately started scanning the room. When we sat down to eat, instead of complimenting the food or asking how I'd been, she stared at the table and said, completely without filter, "Maeve, this table is gorgeous, but this dining room feels a little claustrophobic. If it were me, I'd coat this wood in a bright white paint and knock that wall down to let some natural light in." My internal security system instantly went on high alert. Paint my grandmother's heirloom white. Knock down my walls. Harrison just looked at her with this gooey, infatuated smile, while I felt a jolt of pure electricity hit the room. I managed a polite smile, but the cornbread suddenly tasted like sawdust. Right then, I realized being a mother-in-law wasn't going to be the cakewalk I'd imagined. This girl hadn't come to blend into our world. She was here to completely rewrite my sons. After the wedding, Harrison and Penelope rented a small bungalow just 15 minutes away from me. I told myself it was a blessing. I could be close enough to help out. We'd respect each other's privacy, sure, but what was the harm in a little maternal love? The following Saturday, I drove over with a basket of homemade pastries and a few bottles of the lavender fabric softener Harrison had loved since he was a kid. Harrison had given me a spare key for emergencies. Figuring the kids were sleeping in, I quietly let myself in. The house was an absolute disaster zone. Penelope's sketchbooks and design layouts were scattered all over the living room floor. The kitchen sink was overflowing with dirty dishes. Driven by the pure instinct of a woman who had run a tight household for 40 years, I rolled up my sleeves. I washed the dishes, sorted the laundry, and neatly stacked the chaotic piles of paper on Penelope's desk. I felt incredibly useful. "Maeve, what are you doing?" Penelope's sharp voice from the stairs startled me, and a coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the counter. She stood there, hair a messy bird's nest, her face tight with anger instead of gratitude. "Good morning, Penelope. I just wanted to help out a bit." I stammered, feeling the color rush to my face. "Maeve, this is our private space." Penelope said, her voice shaking as she tried to keep her composure. "Those papers are a major client project I'm in the middle of. I have a specific system for my mess. Coming into our home unannounced and moving my things, it feels like a total violation of our boundaries." I froze. That word, boundaries, felt like a slap in the face. I looked past her to see Harrison shuffling out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. He gave me an apologetic, helpless look, but didn't say a word to defend me. I packed up my purse, my chest tight. I realized right then that misplaced kindness can sometimes just be a selfish form of control. For a month after the boundary incident, things were in a deep freeze. We only saw each other at formal family gatherings, exchanging chilly, polite smiles. I felt incredibly lonely in my own hometown. Harrison was stuck in the middle, and the last thing I wanted to do was make my son miserable. Then on a warm Sunday afternoon, I was out back pulling weeds in my rose garden when I heard a familiar engine. Penelope climbed out of the car, alone. She was wearing work overalls and holding a small garden trowel. "Maeve," she called out, her voice a little hesitant. "Harrison's out of town on business. I know you have one of the best rose gardens in Savannah. Well, we just bought a place with a little yard, and I keep killing everything I plant. Would you be willing to teach me?" I looked at this big city daughter-in-law, a girl who usually lived behind a computer screen, now totally willing to get her hands dirty, just to learn from me. The stubborn pride of an old woman started to melt away. "Of course," I said, brushing the dirt off my hands. "Come on over. First, you need to understand the soil. We didn't bring up the past that afternoon." Instead, I showed Penelope how to prune away the old dead canes to make room for new growth. I explained that if you hold on to a withered branch out of sentimentality, the plant burns all its energy and can never truly bloom again. Penelope listened intently, her artistic hands making a clean, decisive cut on an old stem exactly where I showed her. She looked up at me, her eyes bright. "I get it, Maeve. Sometimes you have to let go of the old structure so the new stuff has room to breathe." I looked at her, and a weight lifted from my shoulders. The garden wasn't just healing us. It was teaching me how to be the mother of a grown man. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I made the agonizing decision to hand the hosting duties over to Penelope. It was tough. For over 30 years, I had been the undisputed queen of the holiday kitchen. But I knew that if I didn't step back, Penelope would never get to establish her own home. When my older friends and I walked into Penelope's house, the aroma drifting from the kitchen wasn't the familiar, comforting scent of butter-roasted turkey and sage. Instead, the air was thick with exotic spices and Mediterranean herbs. "Maeve, I did a roasted turkey breast stuffed with quinoa pine nuts and a spicy pomegranate glaze," Penelope announced proudly as she set the platters down. "I figured we could try something a little cleaner and lighter this year." I looked at the plate, a quiet wave of disappointment washing over me. To a born and bred Southern woman, Thanksgiving without heavy mashed potatoes, butter-soaked stuffing, and a traditional bird felt sacrilegious. I noticed my friends exchanging skeptical glances, but then I remembered the lesson from the rose garden. I picked up my fork, took a bite of the turkey with the pomegranate glaze, and chewed. The tartness of the fruit mixed with a subtle kick of spice was an absolute flavor explosion. It was entirely different, but it was fantastic. "This is actually delicious and incredibly creative, Penelope," I said sincerely, looking her right in the eye. The tension broke in Penelope's face, and her eyes filled with immense gratitude. She confessed later she'd been terrified to tears about the menu, expecting me to tear it apart. By accepting her food, I realized I was accepting her. Tradition isn't about a rigid recipe. It's about the love shared around the table. It hit me then. What I had been lacking was a little boldness. I had spent too long playing it safe in my familiar kitchen, my familiar garden, and my rigid ideas of how life should look. At 68, I wasn't meant to just sit on a porch and live in the past. I had my own life to live, a little late-stage rebellion to unleash, and a healthy dose of wit left in me. Dear Quiet Revenge family, we wanted to take a moment to thank you for your kindness, encouragement, and support over the years. Many viewers have asked how they can help the channel. While AI tools may assist with certain production tasks, every story is carefully chosen, edited, fact-checked, reviewed, and prepared by our team before publication. We work hard to create thoughtful stories that honor real emotions and life experiences. If you would like to help us continue this work, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with a contribution equal to the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family Co-Fi https://co-fi.com/The Story Family PayPal https://www.paypal.com/PayPalEmi/Kanhwangan. Most of all, thank you for being here. Your comments, stories, and encouragement help make this community special. After the Thanksgiving dinner, while Harrison was completely passed out on the sofa, from a food coma, Penelope and I sat together at the table. I looked at the mountain of dishes and sighed. Penelope looked at me and shook her head. "You know, Maeve," she whispered, "Harrison thinks he's the ultimate peacemaker here. But honestly, his clumsy attempts at handling us are what cause half the friction." I burst out laughing. It turned out we both saw right through him. Harrison would tell me, "Penelope loves this dish, you should make it," and then turn around and tell her, "My mom is a neat freak, make sure the house is spotless." He was accidentally turning two independent women into anxious people-pleasers in the name of love. "I have a proposition," Penelope said, leaning her chin on her hand with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Harrison's birthday is coming. He wants us to do a 3-way family camping trip up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, instead of suffocating together in a cramped tent. What if we play this differently?" I raised an eyebrow, feeling a sudden surge of fun. "What are you thinking?" We pretend to get into a massive disagreement about the accommodations. We force Harrison to just give up and go on a rugged man trip with his buddies. And you and I'll book us a luxury suite at a 5-star resort down in Key West. Just the two of us. No boys, no cooking, just room service and a spa. I stared at my daughter-in-law. She wasn't a rebel. She was a criminal mastermind. We clinked our remaining wine glasses together. The mother-in-law war was officially over, replaced by a secret alliance against the well-meaning management of men. To pull off our great Key West escape, Penelope and I had to put on an Oscar-worthy performance of family friction right in front of Harrison. The goal make him believe that if all 3 of us went into the woods together, it would end in a psychological thriller. During Sunday dinner, Penelope intentionally pushed the button. "Maeve, I really think we should do primitive camping. No electricity, just us and raw nature." I immediately dropped my fork, letting out a sharp, dramatic sigh. "Primitive camping at my age, Penelope? Do you want my arthritis to flare up? I need a proper bed and a spa." Harrison's eyes darted between us, a bead of sweat practically forming on his forehead. He desperately tried to intervene. "Hey, maybe we can find a middle ground, like a nice cabin." "No middle ground," Penelope snapped, jumping up and acting perfectly frustrated. "If we can't even agree on a roof, maybe you should just take your college buddies Harrison. Let Maeve and me stay back and figure things out on our own." I capped it off with a heavy, disappointed shake of my head. Harrison completely folded. He texted his friends that exact night, relieved beyond belief that he was saving both his mother and his wife from a weekend of passive-aggressive warfare. The second Harrison turned his back to go to the kitchen, Penelope threw me a sharp wink across the living room mirror. I bit my lip to keep from howling. At nearly 70 years old, I realized playing the monster mother-in-law on stage was an absolute blast, especially when your daughter-in-law is the director. Harrison headed out early Friday morning with a backpack the size of a refrigerator, earnestly begging us to try to find some common ground while I'm gone. The absolute second his truck cleared the driveway, Penelope pulled up to my house wearing oversized sunglasses and driving a convertible she'd borrowed from a friend. "Let's hit the road, Maeve," she yelled, dropping the formal "Mom" completely. A few hours later, we were crossing the overseas highway into Key West, surrounded by brilliant sunshine and the crisp smell of the salt ocean. Penelope had booked an incredible oceanfront suite. That night, instead of sitting in Savannah folding laundry, I wore a bright, flowy maxi dress, sitting at a beachside tiki bar with Penelope sipping margaritas and listening to a live rock band. "Maeve," Penelope shouted over the music, "do you have any major regrets in life?" "Yes," I shouted back, taking a healthy sip of my drink. "I regret playing the role of the perfect serious mother for way too long. I thought I always had to be the pillar of propriety." Penelope clinked her glass against mine. "Well, you don't have to do that with me. You're my friend now." Under the neon lights of Duval Street, looking at my daughter-in-law, with her hair whipped wild by the ocean breeze, I realized that deep connection doesn't require rigid family structures or forced Sunday dinners. It can start with a shared secret, a little bit of wildness, and the courage to ditch everyone else's expectations. On our second night in paradise, while Penelope and I were lounging in bed with clay face masks on, watching a 90s rom-com, Penelope's phone lit up. It was Harrison. We both froze. If he found out we were hundreds of miles away in Florida instead of having a Cold War in Savannah, the whole house of cards would collapse. Penelope motioned for absolute silence, hit the speakerphone button, and adopted a perfectly rehearsed, exhausted tone. "Hey, babe. Hey, Penny. Are you and Mom doing okay? No major blow-ups. Semi-close to civilization up here, but the cell service sucks, and I've just been worrying about you guys." The sound of a crackling campfire and wind rustling the trees came through the line. Penelope shot me a panicked look, pleading for backup. I immediately leaned close to the phone and let out a series of frail, theatrical coughs, pitching my voice into a weak, elderly rasp. "Penelope, honey, could you bring me a warm glass of water with lemon, please?" Penelope's face turned bright red as she violently tried to suppress her laughter. She managed to choke out into the receiver, "See, babe, I'm taking good care of her. Go enjoy your campfire. Love you," and slammed the phone shut. The two of us fell back into the pillows, laughing so hard, our clay masks literally cracked into pieces. I hadn't laughed like that since my husband passed away. It was a harmless, beautiful little lie, and it proved one thing: we had found a secret language that Harrison would never understand, the language of two women taking total control of their own lives. Every vacation has an expiration date. We rolled back into Savannah on Sunday afternoon, beating Harrison home by a mere hour. I quickly traded my beach dress for my standard linen shirt and kitchen apron, while Penelope scattered a few design sketches across her dining table to look like she'd been grinding away all weekend. Harrison walked through the door, looking like a mountain man, smelling of campfire smoke and covered in mud, but his eyes lit up when he saw his mother and his wife sitting peacefully together at the round oak table. "I'm back," he cheered. "How was the weekend? Did you guys survive?" I smiled, completely prepared to deliver our scripted alibi when Harrison suddenly spotted something on the floor. He leaned down and picked up a bright neon plastic band. It was a VIP wristband from a beach bar that read, "Key West, Paradise Found." It had slipped right out of Penelope's tote bag. Harrison stared at the wristband, then looked up, taking a long, hard look at the sudden, unmistakable suntans we both sported, tans that a cloudy autumn weekend in Savannah could never provide. He raised an eyebrow, putting the pieces together with sudden sharp clarity. "Mom, Penny, were you two in Florida?" Penelope and I locked eyes. There was no panic. Penelope just gave a casual shrug, and I calmly took a sip of my sweet tea. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like a victory lap. Harrison sat down in a chair, looking at the two most important women in his life, with a mix of utter bewilderment and total amusement. "So you two completely played me just to go on a girls' trip. We didn't play you, Harrison," I said, gently tapping my fingers on the oak table. "We established a healthy boundary. You've always wanted Penelope and me to get along on your terms, but we have our own way of connecting, and frankly, sometimes the best way to do that is to get away from you." Penelope walked up behind his chair, wrapping her arms around his shoulders with a laugh. "Exactly, babe. Your days as a referee are officially over. The rules of the game just changed." To anyone out there navigating the later chapters of life, the greatest lesson I learned from my Brooklyn daughter-in-law wasn't about interior design or learning how to compromise. It was a lesson in pure freedom. A beautiful relationship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law isn't built by forcing each other into neat, perfect boxes just to keep the man in the middle happy. It happens when you finally see each other as individual women, complete with our own desires, our own streaks of rebellion, and the absolute right to live life out loud. Now, when we sit around our 3-generation oak table, there are no stiff formalities or forced conversations. There is only genuine laughter, shared secrets, and an unbreakable alliance between two modern American women. Dear, quiet, revenge family, we wanted to take a moment to thank you for your kindness, encouragement, and support over the years. Many viewers have asked how they can help the channel. While AI tools may assist with certain production tasks, every story is carefully chosen, edited, fact-checked, reviewed, and prepared by our team before publication. We work hard to create thoughtful stories that honor real emotions and life experiences. If you would like to help us continue this work, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with a contribution equal to the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family Co-Fi, https://co-fi.com/The Story Family, PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPalme/Han Huangmin. Most of all, thank you for being here. Your comments, stories, and encouragement help make this community special.